Good afternoon. I'm Stephen Bader, Executive Director of the East Bay Economic Development Alliance, or East Bay EDA. I'm pleased to be joined here today by my colleagues, Lynn Naylor, CEO of Innovation Tri-Valley, Kristen Connolly, President and CEO of the East Bay Leadership Council. For the last several years, our three organizations have been actively coordinating and partnering on legislative and policy issues of regional significance, including education, transportation, water, and many other issues. Prior to the pandemic, our three organizations would organize annual delegations of our members and stakeholders to meet with our formidable group of East Bay elected leaders who represent our region in Sacramento to ensure that our voices are being heard as bills affecting our key issue areas are being deliberated by the legislature. And while we haven't done one of those joint trips to Sacramento since 2019, our three organizations have been continuing to work together on a variety of issue areas, although this work has been more behind the scenes for most of you. So it is with that backdrop that we are very excited to welcome all of you today for an important conversation with Assemblymember Buffy Wicks about housing issues in our region and state. I will now turn over the program to Kristen Connolly of the East Bay Leadership Council, who will guide us through today's conversation with Assemblymember Wicks.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I'm so grateful to partner with the organizations, and I'm thrilled to have Assemblymember Buffy Wicks here. She's got a really tight time frame, and so we want to just dive right in, and there's keen interest. And so just so you know who's listening in, Assemblymember Wicks, it's members from all three organizations. They have no ability to talk, so I'm the only one asking questions. But we have lots of
you get a rule with an iron fist.
I do. So anyway, just congratulations on being chair of the Housing Committee. Very excited about that. And just real quick, let's just start with that question. What are your goals as the Assembly, the chair on the Assembly Committee on Housing and Community Development?
Well, it's a great question because I have lofty goals and then I have more practical milestones we're trying to get to. But I think fundamentally it's to tackle our homelessness and housing problem, right? And our affordability crisis, and the fact that we have 163,000 homeless folks in the state of California, the largest proportionally in any other place in the country. Mm-hmm. I view it as a moral imperative to tackle that problem, which in my opinion starts with, or has a number of different components to that, right? But it's more production of housing at all income levels, subsidized low income, very low income housing, middle income, missing middle, market rate, all of the above strategy on more housing production across the board, which will entail things like streamlining and other stuff, more funds for affordable housing. And some of this stuff is not without controversy, particularly like the streamlining production type bills. I know we have strong opinions by some folks in our community who don't want to build anymore. And I'm a big supporter of building more homes and just think we have to do it. So that's certainly a piece of the equation to me, and overall more broadly what I want to do as housing chair. And I think this issue has reached, I think, a heightened level of concern by constituents, by small businesses who see and live it, and we have to do better by folks in our community. And then the other piece of that too, and this isn't as much in my wheelhouse, but it's a piece of it, is more funding for behavioral health resources for folks who are suffering, who need those types of resources. So there's a lot that goes into it, but really just want to end the housing or the homelessness crisis and make homes more affordable for people. So
it's important to be lofty.
Close a business on that, Yeah.
No, I mean, I find it inspiring to talk to people who know that that's possible, like that they acknowledge that it's a choice that we live this way. And so that means that we can fix it. And so
we have put people on the moon. If we can put someone on the moon, we can house people in our community.
And having spent time I spent 9 years living in New York, and where there is a constitutional right to shelter. And there's a different mindset. It's not perfect. It has problems. Stephen Banks himself talks about cutting a turkey with a chainsaw, a longtime legal aid advocate who went in on the inside. So anyway, I appreciate having lofty goals, and thank you for sharing some of them. Now, this fall, you took part in an Assembly Housing Working Group, right? And learning about some of the opportunities and challenges throughout the state. Now, I assume that, what were some of your takeaways about that? And maybe this goes to more of the practical solutions.
So, there were about 30 of us in the Assembly, and some senators as well, who went all over the state. We were in Concord, Fresno, Salinas, Inland Empire, Los Angeles, San Diego, Chico, all over the state. And really with the idea of one, listening and trying to understand where communities are coming from, seeing with our own eyes the different issues they're grappling with, seeing if there are regional solutions to some of these problems, and seeing what needs to be done statewide. So we can create statewide policy to help folks. And there were some real consistent themes that came out of our visits. One is, I think maybe 20 years ago, you would have homelessness concentrated into a couple key areas in the state, right? Now it is widespread and across the state of California, and suburban rural communities dealing with homelessness problems as well, which means to me that, again, the issue has just been, it is unraveled out of control. So that was very present. Everywhere we went, everyone's saying we don't have ongoing funding for affordable housing. And we need that. We don't have redevelopment anymore. Our state budget is tied to personal income, which, oddly with the pandemic, the rich got richer. And so we had more money in our California budget, which I think many of us anticipated that we were going to have to make all these cuts, after 2020, but we have more money, which is great in terms of money for things. And obviously the governor has done a good job of funding affordable housing, but there isn't a sort of consistent ongoing funding mechanism for affordable housing. And that came up everywhere because every city is struggling with it. And that's one of the things I'm working on that I see. The other issue that came up a lot was, there's tension between the building and construction trades and the affordable housing developers that needs to be addressed. And I think, we have some of the best trained workforce in the world. We do need to build housing that they can live in, so I think having some framework that those that are building the houses can afford to live in them is important, and figure out what that means from a policy point of view. And I think you have nonprofit affordable housing developers and the trades. My hope is willing to sit down and really, and I know they are, sit down and try to make a deal where we can move forward on that issue. That came up. The other thing that came up quite a bit too was, which has been an ongoing issue, but I think was really expressed on this tour, was a real concern about the fact that we have such low percent of home ownership in California. And in America, that's how you build wealth. It's through home ownership. It's through equity with home ownership. And, particularly for families of color, that has been unattainable for many families. And so how do we create more pathways and opportunities for home ownership? And I think part of that obviously is the production. And then the other thing that came up a lot was just this tension and divide constantly between local government and locals saying, state, do not put any regulations on us. Don't give us any sticks. Carrots are fine. We don't want sticks. We've got this. We don't want you telling us where to put housing, what to do with housing, how much housing, all those things, right? And the state saying, you're not building what you need to build. You're not solving the problem, so that kind of like state local divide was very there. And I think a piece of that is also just the sort of NIMBY versus YIMBY conversation. Right? Where you have people that say, listen, like, I don't want anyone else in my community. Like, I like my community the way it is. Go build somewhere else, go to another state, don't stay here, and versus people are saying, we are a state of a welcoming state, bringing new people in. That's part of who we are as Californians. We should be building more housing. And so I think those were some of the tensions that we saw reflected in the tour.
There's so much to ask. So to that end, in terms of thinking about, new opportunities, Senate Constitutional Amendment 2, which has been introduced, do you feel like that has a shot of getting on the ballot, right? That's the Allen Wiener bill around public housing.
Yeah, to repeal Article 34. Which basically makes it so that it's difficult to build any kind of sort of public housing. I think there is certainly energy at the legislature to do that. There's, it's being led in the Senate. It's something that obviously I would support, and I think many of my colleagues would support as well. But putting an ACA, changing the California Constitution is not easy, right? And by design, so we need 2/3 vote in the legislature, and then we would go to the ballot. And I think it's a question of like, what's the right time to do that? The other thing happening in the legislature right now, I don't know if y'all are following it, but we're just kind of coming out of redistricting, and we have 5 special elections coming up in the assembly and 19 open seats. So it's very like every week we're like, someone else is resigning, or what else is going on, and so-and-so's not running for a re-election. And so I think it's going to be a very different legislature next year. And that might provide for us potentially more opportunity. And we also just have a lot of vacant seats. With 5 vacant seats, it's harder to get to the 54 threshold you need to pass these things.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh no, that's a great point. I know there's a special election in Contra Costa to replace and other Solano and Sacramento to replace Jim Frazier.
It's all
April
over the
5th.
map. It's
yeah,
like
all over. Yeah.
Every day someone's like, doesn't want my job that I have now, apparently.
I know, it's very striking, and it wasn't always like this.
Yeah.
So
I'm staying. You guys are stuck with me if you like it or not.
Well, I think a lot of people would say you're just getting started. So, okay, now the governor's proposed budget includes increased funding for bridge funding. And do you think that this will be impactful in the Bay Area, where we have struggled to build needed permanent supportive housing? And as a follow-up, is there anything you hoped to see in the governor's budget that wasn't there?
Yeah, so a couple of things. He did some bridge funding this year. He had done a significant, I don't even know the whole number. God, I can't remember. There's so many numbers swirling in my head last year. And so I think the funding for this year, the bridge funding was seen as just that, because those monies haven't gotten into the sort of bloodstream, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that money will come, and which I think will be good. The thing that I've been worried about, right, is the fact that the eviction funds, we didn't get what we requested from the federal government for that. I hope that we will. We can't let people go unhoused. And so that's an area, and we've been working on that, and we passed a bill to that effect last week, actually, to help ensure that there's some of those funds that are made available. I think the biggest concern that I have is the fact that, again, there's no ongoing funding. And so when you're a developer and you're trying to figure out what is the long-term play, or you're a city and you're trying to figure out how much affordable housing do we actually need, how fast can we onboard it, what's the sort of 5 to 10 year plan to do that? When you don't have a consistent level of ongoing funding every year that you can count on, that you can plan with, it's very difficult to achieve those goals. And so to me, that's like a missing part of the equation here, is how do we ensure that we have that? And thankfully, we've had these big budget surpluses, which has been great. And the governor's been good to give some one-time funds, but to really plan for this problem, to think about how are we going to really tackle it, you have to have a longer term vision, a longer term plan, and a longer term budgetary component that goes with it to ensure that we actually do that. And that's some of the work that I'm working on right now with my team and others, and with leadership and with folks in the assembly, to see if we can kind of really tackle this with a longer term vision of, can we eliminate homelessness in 10, 20 years? And if so, how do we do that? And what's it take? Yeah, exactly. And how do we get the commitment for that long term?
Right. And I know that what I hear from people ask me all the time, why isn't it more coordinated? And why does it feel like that one county is not talking to the other county, and that it's just so disjointed, and that is definitely something that we need? And I know that, Contra Costa is such great leadership in the form of Lavana Martin on all these issues, and we've all gotten smarter because of it. And I'd like to clone her around the state, but I do think that there is a need there. I mean, there's so much to unpack if we're going to get to ending homelessness on any kind of time frame.
I did a joint hearing yesterday. God, my days are maybe it was the day before, I can't remember, with the budget subcommittee that deals with funding for affordable housing. The chair and I did a joint hearing and talked to the administration, various agencies in the administration, at length about the need for coordination, because it's so true. And I don't know if y'all saw, but in the Sacramento Bee a couple days ago, there was an editorial board op-ed. In Sacramento County, there are 61 access points for 114 different programs in the region, and there's no easy way to navigate them. And so of the most skilled person who's experiencing homelessness to try to have to navigate that's very difficult. And so they're at the local level they're under Daryl Steinberg's leadership, kind of trying to hone this all in and bring it together for a single point of entry, which I think is obviously we need to do that here as well, and everywhere across the state, because we do have a lot of these programs and resources, but navigating them has proven to be difficult for folks on the ground who are experiencing this.
Right. So you talked about some of the YIMBY and NIMBY forces that are at play. And full disclosure, you may or may not remember this. I live in Lafayette, so I'm quite familiar of the strong NIMBY forces that are out there, and it takes too long to build an apartment building in our town. But you hear about cities going to great lengths, like Woodside. They're the most, calling out with their mountain lion habitat play. In terms of the state going further, I mean, I would just love to get your thoughts about this tension, because has been this backlash. And in fact, there's a group of city leaders floating, I think, a really dangerous, quite far reaching ballot measure to really kind of curtail the state's police power. So just wanted to get your thoughts about that tension, and what can we do as business leaders wanting to see more housing built to sort of help in that.
Well, and I will say, I think in the Bay Area, we're very lucky because we have, East Bay Leadership Council, we have the Bay Area Council, we have the Oakland Chamber, we have our chambers and our business associations, Silicon Valley Leadership Group. We have a lot of you all have been really on the forefront of leading in the housing conversation. And I think that's incredibly helpful because it impacts your workforce. You don't want to have people who are like living in 2 hours from here, like having to drive. And I know you have that right now, right? And it's terrible for our greenhouse gas, our climate change goals, for quality of life, for our communities. And so I think we have, more than any other part of the state, a more organized business community fighting for and advocating for better housing policy, which is fantastic. And I think it helps people like me and others go to the legislature and say, this is imperative to our economic, well-being in our communities. I don't think you see that as much in other places. But, like SB 9, which passed last year, and that basically allowed for single family zoned communities to have duplexes and tries. I sat in the housing committee last fall and listened to, was that last fall? Yeah. And listened to the debate on that and the opposition from that. And you would have thought we were trying to get skyscrapers passed to the Nevada border, like it was like not
hyperbole. Yeah.
Sorry, my 5-year-old's homesick today.
Hi, no problem.
Okay, look how wet I am. You're wet, sweetie. You should be playing with the water. I'll be done in a sec. I'll be done in a bit. Okay. Okay. Bye, sweetie. Can you shut the door? Okay. Bye, Jojo. Come on, sweetie. I'm on the Zoom. Thank you, sweetie. Sorry.
No, we're very pro JoJo. I tried to wait.
Yeah. So, we're like, she's got a little cough, and it's like, she definitely cannot go to school with a little cough, and it's not COVID. Anyways, you would have thought we were recommending like skyscrapers as far as the eye can see, when really that bill, it's great, but it's not going to like solve our housing crisis. Like, let's be real. Like, it'll help on the margins, and we can do more like ADUs and, junior ADUs and like a split lot and all good stuff. But it's not revolutionary. But it also showed to me how hard the politics are in some of these issues for other parts of the state, where the politics are different in a place like Los Angeles, where I don't know if they have the same kind of organized business groups who are advocating for these things, right? And the political environment is just different down there. Having said all that, we need to do more of this type of stuff. I was a big supporter of SB 50, which would create more transit-oriented housing, which I still believe in. And I use like Rockridge as the example because it's the community I live in. Like, everyone knows Zachary's. We all love Zachary's. But like, if you're sitting there at the bar looking across the street, you see Zachary's, and it's a 1-story building. Yeah. Like, that should be 5-6 stories or whatever it is, right? So we need to get to the place where, for those transit-oriented areas, College Avenue is a perfect example where that should be a much denser area, right? We have the BART, we've got a major bus line, we connect to downtown, we connect to Berkeley, all of these things. That's where we need to build up. And also, you have a lot of small businesses who are struggling in these areas. And if they had more density of housing, there'd be more customers to come into their shops. So I think my hope is that we're going to get into a better place in terms of, ensuring that we have more density in places like that. And the politics has changed on the issue. I ran in 2018 really as like a yes in my backyard YIMBY candidate. And that was a little like risque then, and now like YIMBY is more of a,
there's an organization and a strategy and volunteers.
And we're voting in people that have similar beliefs. Right. And so I think things are changing. They have to.
Right. No, it's not sustainable. And as employers, our employer members have experienced lots of change in terms of where people are living largely because of affordability problems. And so,
Totally.
I think, yeah, your leadership on this issue is going to be, continue to be really, really important. If I could, and I don't want you to get, further ahead than you're comfortable talking about, but at the top, when you were talking about some of your goals and the sensitivity around streamlining, right? And I will just say, like, predating me, years before I became the CEO of the East Bay Leadership Council, we pulled together a bunch of people, including labor and business, to have as sophisticated a conversation as you can have about CEQA reform. And it was really hard. And so, CEQA. So, is there, with our we'll sort of make this the last question, because I know you're on time and you have a time constraint, but what's on your kind of your lofty wish list about some streamlining, and maybe what's the one or two things you think we can actually get done? And I preface that by saying we're here to help, and we know it's hard.
Well, I think, first of all, recognizing that we do need some level of CEQA reform, which I think not everyone's on the same page about that, right?
Right.
And I say this as someone who's like a through and through environmentalist. I vote with the environmental community on everything, and I take some hits on that because I also represent refineries. But I have a 1.5 and a 5-year-old, and I want the planet to be there for them when they get, older. And having said that, I think figuring out how do we sort of honor the true intent of CEQA, where I do think we need environmental reviews for developments, because we need to have a better understanding of how this impacts streets, the community, the broader environmental impact, right, for development. But how do we honor that original intent without it getting sort of used as a tool to stop housing production?
Yeah.
And I think that's
to be a shenanigans that's bad for business, right? Because you can do things anonymously that really kind of actually stop one gas station from going in across another, not, just to use that as an example. I mean, there's great research from Holland and Knight I will reference to, but keep going.
And so I think it's bringing together a diverse set of stakeholders. And the one thing I've learned, and I certainly don't know it all at all, and I'm learning every day in the legislative process, but when you can bring together different stakeholders and figure out how do you create really sound policy that kind of deals with unintended consequences and is thoughtful and can be implemented, and you just take some time in the weeds with folks. And again, it's the environmental community, it's the building trades, it's developers, it's, planners, et cetera. How do we bring folks together to think about what that compromise language can look like? To me, that's how you get better public policy. And that, to me, is the goal of how we will tackle that problem.
Okay. Well, you actually answered that faster than I imagined. So I'm going to give you one.
Give it to me. Are you like Prop 13? Like, give me all the hot button.
No. I say those. Yeah, no. I try to just ease into that 45 minutes into a conversation with only 30 minutes. I'm not going to ask you about Prop 13. That's not fair. But in terms of thinking about us engaging as advocacy, right? We're three different advocacy organizations together from the East Bay. In terms of, what are your top housing bill priorities right now, and that you need our active support on in this session? So sort of, this is like, how can we help you?
That's a great question. We are trying to pull together the pieces. Some of this isn't public yet. We will have a more robust conversation around what bills are moving forward in March. So I'll come back to you guys with that. But let me give you a little teaser. Okay. The affordable housing piece and the ongoing funding, finding a mechanism for that is something we're taking a deep dive in.
Okay.
Because that's how we're going to tackle the homelessness that we see, I think.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be a light lift, and it's going to be very political, and it's going to be difficult, and we're going to need the business community fully engaged with us to that end. There's also some work being done in the legislature right now about with regard to home ownership.
All right. Okay.
And ensuring we have more ability for folks to purchase homes. And again, it's not all this stuff is public yet, but I'm happy to come back to you guys. But those are also going to be some pretty big lifts. I haven't totally debriefed yet with Scott Wiener in terms of what they're planning on doing on the Senate side, but I think he'll have some more my assumption is he'll have some more kind of streamlining type bills that I think are going to be critical, that will need help. So, and I think part of it is also from your guys' perspective, you have people like me and Nancy and Scott and others who will not just vote for these bills, but push for housing production stuff. We need help with some of our colleagues in other parts of the state, or even other parts of the Bay Area, frankly, right? Who have different sort of political calculations. So we're going to need help from your associates in other parts of the state. And I'm happy to come back to you when we roll these out and see if you all want to be helpful.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that you have been a great sport for taking the rapid fire, boom, 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 boom. We certainly stand at the ready. And I will just ask one last silly thing. I promise, Lynn, I'm going to pitch it to you in a minute. What do you think of the new situation in Sacramento? Like the swing building, can we come walk the walls yet? Can we walk the halls and,
it's, I will say the actual offices themselves for me are a little bit nicer. Cause I was like a freshman and then like, I was in like the dregs of the building, you know what I mean? Yes. So that I have a window now. I didn't have a window. I was like, wow, I'm really like moving on up, guys. I have a window. So I like this. I like the actual space, the sort of commute, if you will, from the swing space to the floor is much longer. And I'm like perpetually late. I need to build in more time, but I got to get my kids off to like school and all this other stuff in the morning. So it's like kind of a bit of a nightmare. And also I'm like doing vaccine legislation so that I get welcomed by those that don't agree with vaccines all the time, which is totally fine. So it makes for like interesting conversation on the way into the building. It's just a little bit further. It makes me late. That's the only thing, but come on up soon. I think once we get through this sort of Omicron wave, hopefully we'll have people back in the building and have you all wandered around the hallways, but I'd love to have you guys come say hi. Would love to chat with y'all whenever you're willing and able.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Assemblymember Wicks. I'm going to pitch it to my friend and colleague, Lynn Naylor, the CEO of the Innovation Tri-Valley Leadership Group, to close us out.
Terrific. Thank you, Kristen. And thank you, Assemblymember Wicks. This has been really helpful. We just want you to know we share your optimism and we're grateful for your leadership.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. The three organizations here, East Bay Economic Development Alliance, East Bay Leadership Council, and Innovation Tri-Valley Leadership Group, really proud to come together on some of these topics. We want to thank you for being with us and everyone else on the call today, and for continually advocating for the housing opportunities we must just have for our employers and our workforce. All boats must rise in the region. Have a great afternoon and thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.